My children humiliate me and kicked me out in front of all relatives at my elder son's wedding. I secretly closed all bank accounts. Hi, if you want more emotional or revenge stories like this, then hit the like button and subscribe also. My name is Helen Brooks, and if you had told me years ago that the greatest pain in my life would not come from losing my husband, not from struggling to raise 3 sons on my own, not from hunger or exhaustion or loneliness, but from the very children I carried into this world, I would have never believed you. But life does not ask what we believe, life simply unfolds. And sometimes it unfolds in ways we never imagined. I remember the day of my eldest son Daniel's wedding as clearly as I remember the day each of my sons was born. I woke early that morning before the sun had even risen. I stood in the kitchen making a pot of coffee, and as I poured myself a cup, I noticed how quiet the house felt. Too quiet. A wedding day, especially that of a firstborn, should feel joyful. But instead the house felt hollow. Still, I told myself it was just nerves. I had ironed my soft, pale blue dress the night before, smoothing out every wrinkle slowly, taking my time like it was something sacred. It was the dress Daniel always said made me look like heaven on a spring day. He used to say that when he was 10, when he still ran to me after school, backpack bouncing, cheeks flushed from playing outside, when he still believed I was the safest place in the world. I tried to hold on to that memory as I got dressed, as I wrapped the gift I planned to give him and his bride. It was a family Bible, passed down from my grandmother. Inside it were handwritten notes, birth dates, marriage dates, prayers scribbled in faded ink, verses underlined by hands that had weathered more than I ever knew. I wanted to give it to Daniel to start his own family history, his own blessings. I thought it would mean something. I truly did. The wedding hall was beautiful. A large white building with tall glass doors and polished stone steps. I remember how the sunlight reflected off the windows in a way that made you squint just to look at it, like the place was too bright to be real. People were laughing when I walked in, music playing softly in the background, waiters carrying trays of sparkling drinks. But as soon as I stepped through those doors, the atmosphere shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. Conversations quieted. Eyes turned. Some curious. Some indifferent. Some uncomfortable. I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was just being self-conscious. I walked deeper into the hall, clutching the gift to my chest. There were relatives I hadn't seen in years, cousins, uncles, distant family friends. Many of them looked at me with awkward half-smiles, the kind of smiles people give when they don't know what to say but feel like they should say something. I tried to greet them, but most of them only offered nods, then quickly turned back to their conversations. I kept searching the room for my sons, and there he was, Daniel, standing near the altar adjusting his tie. He looked so handsome, so grown, so far away. I took a step toward him, but before I could reach him, someone moved in front of me. It was his bride's mother, a well-dressed woman with perfect hair and jewelry that sparkled under the lights. She didn't smile, not even politely. Her voice was quiet but sharp enough to cut. She said, "Helen, you weren't supposed to come." For a moment my world went silent. I actually thought I misheard her. I blinked and tried to steady my voice. "I'm the groom's mother," I said softly, a nervous laugh escaping before I could stop it. "Of course I'm supposed to be here." But then Daniel turned around, and I saw his face. He wasn't happy to see me. Not surprised. Not confused. Just uncomfortable. Embarrassed. Like I was a problem he needed to handle. He didn't even meet my eyes. "Mom," he began, his voice low, controlled. We agreed that today was for the family that helped support us into adulthood. The family that helped us become who we are." My mouth fell open just slightly. My heart began to race. I supported him. I worked double shifts while he studied. I stitched his clothes when we couldn't afford new ones. I stayed awake through fevers and nightmares and heartbreaks. I tried to ask him what he meant, but then Aaron stepped forward. My youngest. The one with the sharp tongue. He folded his arms and looked at me like I was something beneath him. "What he means," he said louder, harsher, "is that you don't belong here. You didn't give us anything worth remembering. You don't fit with this life. You need to leave before you embarrass us." It felt like the air was knocked out of my lungs. I looked desperately to Michael, my middle boy, my quiet one, my thinker. He met my eyes briefly and looked away. He muttered, barely audible, "Mom, just go. It's better this way." And then, as if God himself wanted to mark that moment, the gift I'd been holding slipped from my trembling hands and fell to the floor. The Bible struck with a small, heartbreaking sound. I bent down to pick it up, but before I could reach it, Aaron stepped forward and kicked it aside with the heel of his shiny shoe, like it was trash. And Daniel put his hand on my shoulder, not with love, not with care, but with the firm, cold touch of someone removing something unwanted, and whispered, "Please leave. And don't come back unless we ask you to." I didn't cry. Shock is a strange thing, it freezes pain before it lets it thaw. I walked out of the hall slowly, like my body remembered movement but my soul did not. Outside the air was cold. I sat down on the sidewalk holding the Bible against my chest, and for the first time in my life I felt truly alone. Not lonely. Alone. The kind of alone where the world goes silent and heavy, where nothing touches you because everything has already cut too deep. When I finally stood up, I didn't go home. I walked to the bank. My hands were steady now. My voice was steady. My heart was still bleeding, but something inside me had gone quiet. I told the banker I needed to close every account connected to my sons. Every shared card, every automatic payment, every emergency savings account I had built over decades. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. But because in that moment I finally understood the truth. I did not lose my children that day. I had lost them long before. I just hadn't seen it. And when the banker clicked the last confirmation, I breathed in slowly and whispered to myself, "Love is not a debt. And I am no longer paying." And that was the day I walked out of motherhood and into something I didn't yet have a name for. After leaving the bank, I didn't really have a plan. I just walked. My feet carried me through streets I had known for years, past shops I once visited with my boys when they were small, past the playground where Daniel fell off the slide and I kissed his scraped knee as he cried into my shoulder, past the corner store where Aaron used to beg me for candy and I'd say we couldn't afford it, but somehow I'd always find enough coins in my pocket anyway. The town hadn't changed. But I had. I walked until my legs trembled and my hands went numb in the cold. By the time I looked up again, I was standing in front of a small apartment building on the other side of town. The paint was chipped, the stairs a little crooked, ivy crawling up the bricks like time trying to reclaim what humans had made. There was a room for rent sign taped to the inside of the window. I didn't think. I just went inside. The landlord was an older woman named Mrs. Reed, with silver hair piled up loosely on her head and a kind of tired gentleness in her eyes. She didn't ask many questions. She showed me a small room on the second floor. One window. One narrow bed. A small wooden dresser. A kitchen and bathroom shared with 2 other tenants. It wasn't much. But it was quiet. And right then, quiet mattered more than comfort. She told me the cost. It was more than I wished to spend but less than I feared. I signed the lease. I moved in that day. I didn't have clothes or dishes or blankets with me. Everything I owned was still in the house where my sons lived. The home I raised them in. The home they had effectively taken from me long ago without saying the words. That first night I slept in my dress. I covered myself with my coat and used the Bible, the one that had been nearly kicked across the wedding floor, as a pillow. I cried only once. Quietly. So quietly that even I barely heard myself. Because once you reach a certain kind of heartbreak, tears don't fall loudly anymore. They fall inward. The next morning, I woke up unsure of what to do. For the first time in 28 years, I had no one to cook for, no one to pack lunches for, no one to check on or wait up for. I made myself a small cup of tea in the shared kitchen. Felt strange to only make 1 cup. My hands kept reaching for extra mugs out of habit. It took weeks for that habit to fade. I found work cleaning offices in the evenings and folding clothes at a thrift shop during the day. The money was not much. But I survived. I bought simple groceries. Bread. Eggs. Potatoes. Rice. I learned to cook for one. I learned to eat alone. I learned that silence can feel like a wound at first. But then in time it becomes something else. A room where you can finally hear your own breathing. Months passed before I heard anything about my sons. One day I received a phone call, not from them, but from a banker informing me that Daniel and Aaron had tried to access the closed accounts. They had demanded answers. They had argued. They had shouted. But the bank had nothing to give them. That night, I sat on my narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. A strange emotion rose in my chest, Not satisfaction, not revenge, just a quiet, tired certainty. They had chosen to live without me. Now they would learn what it meant to live without what I had sacrificed. Weeks later, there came a knock at my door. A sound so sudden and sharp it sent a chill through my body. I opened it slowly, and there they were, my 3 sons, standing in the dim hallway of the building I now called home. They looked different. Not elegant and confident like at the wedding, but tense, restless, almost desperate. Daniel spoke first. His voice was controlled, but his eyes had an edge of panic. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. I didn't invite them inside. I stood in the doorway, holding the frame lightly with one hand. Michael looked at the floor. Aaron's jaw was clenched. Daniel exhaled, frustrated. "Mom, you need to reopen the bank accounts. The wedding expenses, bills, things are piling up. You have responsibilities too. You can't just cut us out like this." His words were sharp, careless, as though the past year had taught him nothing. I remember feeling my heart tighten, not with pain this time, but with a heavy, grounded clarity. I said only, "I don't owe you anything anymore." Aaron stepped forward, his voice louder, sharper, almost a growl. "We're your sons. You can't just walk away from us." I looked at him. My once laughing child turned into something cold and hungry, and I asked softly, "Why did you walk away from me then?" Silence fell. A silence that felt heavier than the hallway itself. Daniel's face hardened. His voice dropped to a low, threatening tone. "If you don't open those accounts, something bad is going to happen. Don't make us do something we'll regret." And in that moment, standing in the dim hallway with my coat hanging loose around my shoulders and my hair gray and unstyled and my heart tired but steady, I realized something. They did not come to reclaim a mother. They came to reclaim money. I closed the door. Slowly. Firmly. And I locked it. Behind that thin wooden door, I exhaled a breath I had been holding for years. I leaned my forehead against the cool surface and whispered, "I did not raise you to be this. But this is who you have chosen to become." That was the night I understood that family is not defined by blood. It is defined by love. And love was no longer something they offered me. But I did not know then, could not know, that this was only the beginning of the storm. Because what my sons wanted, they were willing to take by any means necessary. The days after that hallway confrontation felt heavier than any winter I had ever lived through. I carried their words with me, not because they frightened me at first, but because I couldn't understand how the same mouths that once said, "I love you, Mom," could now form threats so easily. I kept going to work. I kept making my quiet meals. I kept folding clothes at the thrift store, where sometimes I caught myself smoothing the fabric the way I used to smooth their hair when they fell asleep on my lap as boys. People don't realize how much a mother's body remembers. Even when the heart tries to forget. Everything went on quiet and cold, until one evening when I came home from work and saw my apartment door slightly open. Just a sliver. Just enough to make my breath stop in my chest. I always locked my door. Always. I pushed it open slowly and inside everything was disturbed. My dresser drawers open. My mattress pulled from the frame. My closet emptied onto the floor. My Bible thrown aside. Someone had searched not in anger, but with purpose. They were looking for something. Money. Papers. Bank documents. Anything that could lead them back to what I had taken away. I stood there in the mess of my small room, the silence so loud it buzzed. And that was the first moment I felt fear. Real fear. Not sadness. Not heartbreak. Fear. I reported it to the landlord, and she nodded, tight-lipped, her eyes flicking toward the hallway as if she already suspected who might have been behind it. But I didn't tell her the truth. I didn't tell her it was my sons. I couldn't form the words. There is a shame that comes when the people you love become dangerous. A shame that does not belong to you, but still clings like smoke to everything you touch. I cleaned the room. I put everything back where it belonged. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the bed holding that Bible in my lap, with a small lamp on, waiting as if light could protect me. I didn't know that was only the first warning. Weeks later, as I was walking home after my evening job, I heard footsteps behind me. Quick. Purposeful. At first I thought nothing of it, but then I crossed the street, and the footsteps crossed too. My heart began beating faster, hard enough I felt it in my throat. The night was quiet. The air cold. The street dim. And then I heard a voice low, meant not to be overheard, but close enough that I could not mistake it. Just grab her. I had no time to think. No time to scream. A hand reached for my arm, fingers tightening around my coat sleeve, and that was when a car pulled up, headlights washing over us. The hand released. The footsteps scattered. I was left standing in the middle of the road, trembling. The car slowed and the driver leaned out his window. "You all right?" he asked. I nodded, though I could barely breathe. He drove on, and I stood there long after the street was empty, trying to understand how love can turn into danger so quietly, like water freezing into ice while you're still drinking it. After that night, I began to live differently. I changed the path I walked home. I made sure never to go out after dark. I kept my keys wrapped around my fingers when walking alone, the way women learn to do when they are afraid. And still the danger found its way in. There were phone calls. Late at night. Silence on the line. Breathing. Waiting. Not speaking. But I knew. Oh, I knew. One afternoon while I was folding sweaters in the shop, I overheard two women talking about my son Michael, my youngest, the one who had once spent hours drawing pictures of superheroes and telling me he would protect me always. They said his marriage was struggling. They said he had lost his job. They said he'd been seen talking to men who dealt in things that lived in shadows. When I heard that, my hands froze mid-fold. I realized then, this was not just anger or entitlement anymore. This was desperation. And desperate people become dangerous. Still, I held on to hope. Hope is a foolish thing sometimes, but a mother's heart clings to it longer than it should. I thought maybe time would soften them. Maybe one day they would come back, not for money but for me. But instead the threat grew sharper. One evening I returned to find a note slipped under my door. Plain paper. Plain handwriting. No greeting. No signature. Open the accounts. Last chance. I sat down on the bed and held the paper between my fingers. I don't know how long I sat like that. Minutes. Hours. Time didn't feel real. What I do know is that something inside me shifted. A quiet voice, one I had ignored for years, finally spoke. They are not coming back to you. Not as sons. Not as family. Not as love. But I didn't break. I didn't run. I didn't surrender. I simply folded the note and placed it inside my Bible. Not as a memory but as a promise. A promise that I would not fear them. A promise that I would not give them what they had already thrown away. However, when you refuse to bend to those who are desperate, they push harder. And the next time they came for me, they did not come to scare me. They came to end me. The night it happened, the sky was dark in that way where clouds covered the moon and the world felt smaller, tighter, as if everything were holding its breath. I had just finished cleaning the office building where I worked evenings. My feet were tired, my back aching in that familiar old way, and I walked slowly, one hand in my coat pocket, the other holding my grocery bag with a loaf of bread and a few apples. The streets were mostly empty. Even the air felt still. Quiet. Too quiet. I turned onto Willow Street, the street where the apartment building stood, and that was when I heard a car door quietly shut behind me. Not slammed. Not loudly. Quiet. Controlled. Intentional. I kept walking but my steps slowed. My ears sharpened. I could hear footsteps behind me now. More than one set. Not hurried. Just following. Matching my pace. Fear didn't come all at once. It crept up my spine 1 inch at a time. I reached the apartment building and started up the stairs. I could hear them following. I fumbled with my keys, my hands suddenly shaking. I got the door to the building open and stepped inside, but before I could reach the stairs to the second floor, I felt a hand clamp around my wrist. A man's hand. Strong. Cold. I gasped, but before I could scream, another hand covered my mouth. I was pushed against the wall, the grocery bag dropping to the floor, apples rolling in opposite directions. The hall smelled like old paint and dust and fear. There were 3 of them, all wearing dark jackets. Their faces weren't covered. They weren't afraid of being seen. That terrified me more than anything. One of them leaned close to my ear and whispered, "You should have listened." His breath was hot. His voice calm. Too calm. Like this wasn't personal. Like this was simply a job. My mind raced. I didn't know if I should fight, scream, plead. But before I could do anything, a loud voice echoed from the stairs. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" It was my landlord's son, a tall, broad-shouldered man named Jacob who lived downstairs. He had just come home and walked in at the exact moment my life was about to disappear into a hallway of peeling wallpaper. The attackers froze for only a second, but sometimes a second is all a miracle needs. They ran. Out the door. Into the night. Gone before Jacob could chase them. I stood there shaking so hard I thought my bones would shatter. He put his coat over my shoulders and guided me upstairs, his voice gentle but urgent. Sit. Breathe. I've got you. You're safe now. I couldn't speak. The fear had locked itself inside my throat like a fist. He called the police. They asked questions. I tried to answer. I told them about the note, the break-in, the threats. They asked if I knew who might want to hurt me. That question hung in the air like a heavy, poisonous fog. I stared at the floor. I couldn't say it. I couldn't make the words real. I couldn't say my children want me dead. But the officers weren't blind. They saw everything I didn't say. After they left, after the questions and the paperwork and the promises to investigate further, after the door closed and the hallway went quiet again, I sat alone in my small room, the lamp casting a warm, soft light across the walls. And that was when the dam finally broke. I cried, not the soft, silent tears I had cried before, but deep, trembling sobs from a place I had kept sealed for too long. I cried for the babies I held, the knees I bandaged, the birthdays I planned, the nights I stayed awake nursing fevers. I cried for every moment of love that had been real. I cried because I couldn't understand how the same lives I helped build could now be trying to destroy mine. And when the tears finally slowed, I looked at myself in the mirror across the room. My reflection looked older. Not just because of years but because of heartbreak. But my eyes had changed. There was something in them I hadn't seen in a long time. Strength. Not rage. Not anger. Strength. The strength of a mother who understood that love does not mean surrender. That love does not mean letting yourself be destroyed. That love sometimes means walking away forever. And that was the night I made a decision. A quiet one. A firm one. If my sons wanted to hunt me, then I would no longer hide. I would protect myself. Even if it meant protecting myself from the very children I gave life to. The morning after the attack, I woke before the sun. The air in the room was still cool and quiet. I sat at the edge of the bed and let my hands rest on my knees, steadying myself. The world outside was moving on. Unaware that something inside me had shifted permanently. I realized that I could no longer pretend this was something that would pass on its own. I could no longer hope that my sons would come to their senses. Hope had carried me this far, but now it had become something dangerous. A softness that could get me killed. I dressed slowly, thoughtfully, choosing clothes like armor rather than comfort. I stepped into my shoes and walked out of the apartment building, the hallway still holding the echoes of what had happened the night before. When I stepped outside, the early morning air was cold and sharp, cutting straight through me. I breathed it in. Felt like waking. I didn't go to work that morning. I walked instead, back to the same bank where months ago I had closed every account that tied me to my sons. The same bank where I had taken back the part of my life I had lost without ever realizing it. The glass doors slid open and I stepped inside. The same faint smell of floor polish and printed paper greeting me. The same teller recognized me. She smiled softly, almost sadly, as if she remembered. I told her I needed to speak with someone privately. She led me to a small office in the back. I sat down across from a financial advisor, a calm young woman with gentle eyes. I told her everything. Not the emotional story. Not the heartbreak but the facts. The accounts. The attempts to access them. The threats. The break-in. The attack. My voice never cracked. Didn't need to. The truth was strong enough on its own. She listened without interrupting, her expression changing from polite professionalism to concern. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "Mrs. Brooks," she said softly, "you've done the right thing. And you need to protect yourself legally now." Those words echoed in my mind. Protect yourself legally. The way she said it, it didn't feel like a suggestion. Felt like a lifeline. She referred me to an attorney, a calm older man with silver hair and a quiet confidence. I met with him that same afternoon. I told him everything again. This time I didn't hold back the emotional truth. I told him that these were my sons. My babies. The same children I raised alone after their father passed. The same boys who used to curl up beside me during thunderstorms because they were scared of the thunder. The same boys who used to bring me dandelions from the yard as if they were bouquets of gold. He listened, not with pity but with gravity. When I finished, he said something I will never forget. Love does not excuse harm. And blood does not excuse danger. There was silence after that. A silence that felt like a door closing, and another door opening. We filed a formal report with the police. A restraining order request. Documentation of threats. Evidence of break-ins. Descriptions of the men who followed me. The police were no longer polite and detached. Now they were alert, serious, involved. Something shifted. I was no longer just a mother trying to hold on to hope. I was a woman who had chosen to defend her life. And that choice enraged my sons. The next weeks were full of tension. Every time I opened my door, I expected danger. Every time I walked down the street, I scanned for shadows. Every sound at night made my heart jump. But I did not run. I did not hide. I lived. Quietly. Strongly. Steadily. Then one evening as I was returning from the thrift shop, I saw them, all three of them, standing across the street in the fading daylight. Daniel, Aaron, Michael, not together like brothers, but shoulder to shoulder like conspirators. Their faces were hard, their eyes cold, their posture tight. For a moment none of us moved. The world around us kept going, cars passing, dogs barking, wind rustling leaves, but the moment belonged only to us. Daniel stepped forward. "Mom," he called out, his voice heavy with something dark. "This is your last chance to fix this." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't show fear. I just looked at them, really looked at them, not as my children, but as men who had chosen a path far away from love. And I said quietly, clearly, steadily, "There is nothing to fix. I did not leave you. You left me." Aaron scoffed. Michael looked down, jaw clenched tight as if fighting something inside himself. Guilt maybe, or maybe just fear of losing what he thought he was owed. Daniel's face twisted, not with pain but with insult, as though I had wounded his pride. Then he said the words I will carry forever. "You're not our mother anymore." And that was the moment something in me finally truly broke. Not in a way that shattered, but in a way that severed. The last string that tied me to the hope that they might return to me was cut. They turned, walked away, didn't look back. And I stood there, hands trembling, heart beating slow and heavy in my chest. Not because I had lost them, but because I finally understood. They were already gone. And now the danger would not be emotional anymore. The next time they came for me, they would come to end what they had started. The final night did not come with warning or signs, or the slow build one might expect when danger is curling toward you. It came the way lightning does, sudden, sharp, without mercy. I remember the air felt unusually still that evening, as though the world had paused. I had cooked myself a small dinner, boiled potatoes, steamed vegetables, nothing special but warm. I had just sat down to eat when I heard it. Not a knock. Not footsteps. The sound of a door downstairs being forced open. A heavy, abrupt wooden crack that vibrated through the floor. For a moment I froze. The fork slipped from my fingers. My breath caught in my chest. And I knew. Not from fear but from certainty. They were here. Not to threaten. Not to frighten. To finish. I moved toward the small nightstand beside my bed where I kept my phone, but before I could reach it, I heard footsteps rushing up the stairs. Fast. Determined. I backed away slowly, my hands trembling, my heart pounding in my throat, each beat aching like a drum calling the end of something that once mattered. The front door of my apartment burst open, and there they stood, my sons. Not the children I raised. Not the boys who used to run barefoot across summer grass. Men sharp-edged, desperate, their eyes wild with rage and hunger for something they had convinced themselves was rightfully theirs. Daniel stepped forward first, his breath coming hard, his hands clenched into fists. "This didn't have to go this way," he said, his voice low and furious. Aaron stood behind him, jaw tight, eyes darting around the room as if calculating. And Michael, my youngest, the one who used to curl into me when he had nightmares, he stood furthest back, his hands shaking, his eyes full of something broken, like he didn't want to be there, but he didn't know how to stop the tide he was caught in. I didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Words were useless now. Daniel moved closer. Open those accounts. Right now. You think the law will protect you? You think anyone cares? You owe us. You owe us everything we are. My voice came out calmer than I felt. I gave you everything I had. And you threw it away. His face changed. Something in him cracked like glass under pressure. He lunged toward me, hand raised, not just to grab me this time but to hurt me. Truly hurt me. And then, a loud crash from the hallway. A shout. A rush of boots. The sound of a voice yelling. Police! Hands where we can see them. I didn't even understand what was happening at first. It all moved too fast. Officers stormed in, one of them pushing past my sons, another grabbing Daniel's wrist mid-swing, twisting it behind his back. Aaron tried to run, but he didn't make it 2 steps. Michael didn't move at all. He just sank to the floor, hands over his head, as if his bones couldn't hold him anymore. The room filled with noise, shouts, restraints, the scrape of shoes on wood floor. But through it I saw one face, my landlord's son Jacob, standing in the doorway breathing hard. He had heard the front door break. He had called the police without hesitation. He had saved my life twice without ever asking why I needed saving. The officers had my sons handcuffed before I could even stand upright. Daniel fought. Aaron cursed. Michael cried quietly, silent tears running down his cheeks like a child who has lost something he never knew how to keep. One of the officers turned to me and said gently, "You're safe now. It's over." But I knew something they didn't. It would never truly be over. Because safety does not erase love. And love does not erase what was done. The officers led my sons down the stairs. Their footsteps echoed. The front door closed. The sirens faded into the night. Silence returned. I sank onto the bed. My hands shook. My heartbeat was a slow, deep ache. I didn't cry. There were no tears left. Only a hollow quietness. The quiet of loss that has already happened. The quiet of a goodbye that was not spoken, but carved into the world. In the weeks that followed there were hearings, statements, courtrooms that smelled of old carpet and paper. I testified. I spoke clearly. I did not tremble. I told the truth, not to punish them but to protect myself. And when the judge handed down the sentence, I did not look at my sons. I could not. Afterward, I returned to my small apartment. The same narrow bed. The same window with the morning light that crept in softly each day. I continued to work. I continued to cook. I continued to breathe. I survived. But sometimes late at night, when the world is quiet and the heartbeat becomes the loudest sound in the room, I remember them. Not as men standing in my doorway with violence in their eyes, but as boys, laughing, running barefoot, calling me mama. And I cry, not because I miss who they are, but because I miss who they used to be. And that is the grief that never ends. If you like my story, then hit the like button and subscribe also.